Lowe's knows how to help you get the most out of your store run. That's why members save more with My Lowe's Rewards. Earn points towards My Lowe's money on eligible purchases. Get access to member-only deals and free member gifts. Plus, unlock free standard shipping when you reach Silver Key status. So what are you waiting for? Join for free today. Lowe's. We help. You save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Today on CityCast Philly, we're talking about a contentious issue in Center City, bike lanes. Last year, Mayor Sherrell Parker signed a law that forbids stopping a vehicle in a bike lane even for a minute. While some residents say this is absurd because it prevents them and delivery drivers from easily accessing their homes, bicycling advocates like my guest, Nicole Bernay, Policy Director of Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, say the new law will save lives. Today is the first part of a new two-part series we're doing about this new Get Out the Bike Lane law. Tomorrow, we're going to hear a different opinion on the issue. It's Monday, February 24th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. So what is it like riding a bike through the streets of Philadelphia?
For the most part, it's really delightful. I find it to be the most reliable way to get around. But there are certain areas of the city that I find incredibly stressful. I work with families who have lost their loved ones in traffic crashes, and it's very present in my brain while I'm on some of these more dangerous stretches of road, especially when I know that the roads could be better, and there are, groups of people who are really trying to get us to a place that anybody can feel safe riding on the streets.
You talked about some of the roadways in Philly being a little bit dangerous. Can you give me an example of which streets, which areas tend to be maybe even your favorite ones to ride and the ones that are actually maybe more dangerous, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I find that roadways that are wider are some of the most terrifying ones to ride on. So the west side of Washington Avenue, I will sometimes go way out of my way to avoid it, especially because of the amount of construction and development that's been on that section of the roadway. I also find some of the small streets in South Philly to be kind of scary. I often will get honked and yelled at from drivers because there's no space for them to pass me. And legally, I am allowed to be riding in the middle of the road, but it doesn't seem like that is something that drivers are aware of. And so I feel those situations to be incredibly stressful. And then I ride a lot on Spruce and Pine. I live on Spruce Street. And it can go from being a delightful way to get around the city to terrifying. I've had drivers purposefully pass me within a foot when I have to go around a car that's stopped in the bike lane. When I'm riding after work, there's a lot of people driving, using the roads to get to 76. And I find that drivers can be very aggressive and not giving that space. So a road that is sometimes very enjoyable can become very stressful very quickly.
Do you think there is a miscommunication between cyclists and drivers?
I think that there is an issue where there's miscommunication. So like I said, it's legal for bicyclists to ride in the middle of the lane if there is no safe passing. So this includes a bike lane or a shoulder wide enough for someone to ride in. And I find that drivers are just not aware of that law and think that we should have to get off the road. I also hear, why aren't bicyclists on the sidewalk? And then I hear, why are bicyclists on the sidewalk? So I feel like a lot of the frustration that I have with drivers come from the place of there not being really any education for the rules of the road. I also understand that there is a lot of frustration from the bike riders' standpoint and from their perspective because the road is not been made to protect vulnerable road users, to protect people walking, riding bikes, or using bike lanes with mobility devices. And so it can be frustrating, and there can be altercations between these different users of the road. And having to ride Spruce Street every day to get home from work, it is just tiring to see this lack of empathy from drivers who use the bike lane as their own personal parking lot.
Have you ever been involved in a crash because of a car?
I luckily have not been hit. I have had some close calls. Like I said, when drivers pass within a foot of me, it's very scary. That is also illegal. We have 4 feet safe passing. There's been some really scary instances when I've been riding up in North Philly on 33rd Street and, drivers are going very fast. They're not looking for you, despite the fact that there's a bike lane on that road. But I have been very lucky to not have been hit. But there are countless examples of people from my office or people that I know who have been hit and thankfully are okay. And then obviously I'm, aware and know the families of a lot of people who have not been able to walk away or have their life saved after those crashes.
Nicole, you talked about just how maybe drivers aren't aware of some of the laws, but is it also part of this, maybe even how streets are designed?
Definitely. Our roadways historically have been designed to get people in cars as fast as possible from point A to point B. This is a serious equity issue. We see some of the most dangerous roads in some of the most low-income areas and minority areas as well. So historically, cities like Philadelphia and others across the country have used dangerous roads to separate communities. And so there are a lot of spaces that the city has been trying to make what are called complete streets. So there's more equal distribution of space for other users on the road. But there's so much we need to do in Philadelphia. And we're not that big of a city, but we have a lot of examples of huge roads that cut across neighborhoods. And so those ones, typically, they fall in the high injury network, which are the 12% of streets with 80% of serious or fatal crashes. And those are the ones that the city is paying a lot of attention to redesign.
So your coalition, the Bicycle Coalition, won a huge victory for bike lanes in the city last year. Vehicles can no longer stop, even for a minute, in a bike lane. How did that policy change come about?
It has been an effort over the years since the Spruce Pine bike lanes went in back in 2011. We were the ones who first requested that the city build bike lanes on these roads back in 2009. But it has been a sticking point with the city not wanting to go back on the compromise that they made when they decided to not protect these lanes. It was to keep the status quo for neighbors and for churches that use that lane for parking on the weekends.
And we're talking about Spruce and Pine Streets.
Yes. And before this bill was passed, there was an effort to change signs in other parts of the city from no parking to no stopping, including the bike lane on Lindbergh Avenue. There's a lot of problems with cars parking in that bike lane. And so part of putting that bike lane in was also updating that signage so there could be enforcement for anybody parking in that space. I have a hard time saying this is a victory. Obviously, it's a great step forward, but we could not get here if Barbara Freitas wasn't killed. It's infuriating to me that we have to be reactionary and we can't be proactive to just save lives in the future. The status quo worked for people because, people got to take advantage of being able to pull over. It was seen as, well, it's not that dangerous if nobody's getting killed. And it took someone getting killed while legally riding in an unprotected bike lane in Center City for this change to occur. That's not to say there aren't plenty of examples of other people riding bikes in bike lanes that are unprotected throughout the city who didn't get the same amount of recognition. For example, Billy McWilliams was killed in 2023 in an unprotected bike lane in Northeast Philly. Mario Diadama was riding in an unprotected bike lane in FDR Park and was killed. Woodson Jones was killed in an unprotected bike lane in Lehigh Avenue in 2023. So I think it really shook a very dense community that had a lot of attention, but we shouldn't have had to wait this long to say, you shouldn't be able to park in a bike lane. It's for people riding bikes.
You use the terminology unprotected bike lanes. Can you actually break that down? What does that actually mean?
Yeah. An unprotected bike lane means there's no vertical deflection between where the cars are driving or drivers are driving and the bicyclists. So we see a lot of examples of this when there's just paint on the road. If you've ever been in a car, you've seen people go over middle lines, dashed lines. Having paint on the road doesn't stop people. And we don't have bike lanes that are separated by hard materials. So we have these flex posts, the white posts that you'll see around the city that are made to be driven over. And then we have painted lines. So we know that just saying you can't stop here isn't enough. We need a physical barrier because drivers make mistakes, but that shouldn't be just acceptable when these vulnerable road users are being killed by these mistakes.
What type of structures or barriers would you like to see installed on Philly streets?
We are asking for concrete protection. A lot of people are confused about what this means. We're not asking for tall Jersey barriers. There are a lot of examples of other cities that use concrete curb or concrete pills, which are kind of like rounded pieces of concrete that are put in the painted buffer space. So it's 2 feet between the travel lane and the bike lane. There are other cities that also use crash-safe planters. And there are examples of these kind of planters throughout the city, like on Market Street and JFK. In Toronto, they have miniature Jersey barriers that they've painted and they have murals on them. There are a lot of examples around the world of how to protect bike lanes with permanent infrastructure that we should be looking at.
So, Nicole, the new law making it illegal to stop in bike lanes is drawing some continued opposition from some residents of Pine and Spruce Streets in Center City. They want to allow residents to park in the bike lanes for up to 10 minutes. They talk about how this will help elderly. This will help people with mobility issues, saying there's not areas for them to stop right in front of their own homes. What's your take on this opposition?
I find it short-sighted. If you currently live on the right side of Spruce and Pine, there are parked cars and you can't load directly in front of your house. So if the issue is just residents who live on the left side of the street, that doesn't feel very equitable. There's also been comments of why can't we just share the space? But when you look at the layout of the road, you have a lane for parked cars, a lane for cars, and then a lane that is supposed to be shared by everyone else. It's very frustrating to hear the complaint that what about people who are disabled or have mobility issues? We know that people who rely on wheelchairs end up using bike lanes because sidewalks, especially in the Rittenhouse area, are not safe for these mobility devices. So to say that bike lanes are anti-disabled residents is just not accurate. As well, part of this plan is to create more loading zones. I know that there's an issue with delivery trucks, people getting Uber Eats or, getting dropped off by cars. And so I think it's very exciting that there'll be an increase in loading zones. So I think that it's using the issue of deliveries and people with mobility issues to cover up the reality, which is they want the freedom to pull over in front of their house, where that's not a freedom that other people in the city are awarded.
More on this issue after the break.
Now at Verizon Business, every business can get the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Plus. Whether you're a new customer, loyal customer, or returning customer, this one's for you, you, and you on America's most reliable 5G network. Get the new Galaxy S25 Plus on us. Powered by Verizon Business. 256 gigabyte on us. New device payment purchase agreement, select trade-in, and business unlimited plan required. Credit varies by smartphone trade-in. Applied to account over agreement term up to 36 months. Terms apply. Limited time offer.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
It seems like our streets have just gotten more complicated because there's e-bikes, e-scooters. Are e-bike riders, like people delivering meals, doing small deliveries, allowed to be in bike lanes?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people use e-bikes. I see them as a mobility device as well. Some people that can't ride a bike are able to use an e-bike to get around. But we do see a large number of e-bike users being what's referred to as deliveristas or delivery riders. They are allowed to be in the bike lane. I believe the cap for speed in a bike lane is 20 miles per hour. So if you're going over that speed, you should be in the travel lane. Also, any vehicle that's gas powered should be in the travel lane and not in the bike lane. This is another benefit of adding more protected bike lanes is we'll see more e-bike users use the bike lane instead of going on sidewalks or in areas that maybe they don't feel safe to ride.
So what's next here? Is the city planning to build protected bike lanes on Pine and Spruce?
So what's next is that the city is finalizing their loading zone plan. They will be creating the no stopping sign, and the goal is to get the no stopping signs up in March. No stopping in bike lanes can be enforced until those signs go up. So that's the first step. We'll see enforcement get started around March and April. The next step is coming up with a design for protecting spruce and pine. The city has released their recommendations, which include these low concrete hills, like I was mentioning before, and adding planters at the corners of the intersections for spruce and pine. The city is also looking into funding for these projects because they could be upwards of $5 million to protect both spruce and pine river to river. There is not an official design yet. I am part of a task force that includes CCRA and Society Hill Neighbors and Wash West and Philly Bike Action that will be working with the city to give our recommendations about the design of the roads. But like I said, the city's recommendation is to protect those lanes.
You mentioned enforcement. Who's actually doing that enforcement?
It'll be the parking authority.
What else are you working on to make the city more friendlier to bike lanes?
A big effort, and what we've been working on for many years, is legalizing parking protected bike lanes. We do have a couple examples of these throughout the city: the east side of Washington Avenue, Market, JFK, Chestnut Street, Walnut Street. But these are allowed under a pilot, so they're not currently legal within our vehicle code. Being able to build parking protected bike lanes on state roads, some of our most dangerous roads, will improve the safety for pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers. And so this has been a big effort. The city currently has 3 projects that they won't be able to build if we don't pass this legislation. This includes a project on Oregon Avenue, which is a very dangerous road that runs river to river in South Philly. Other projects include the road around City Hall, which, if you may remember, somebody lost their leg from a serious crash late last year, and a road up in Northeast Philly called Verhey Road, which is a trail connection to Pennypack. So these are really important projects, and it'll help improve the safety on large state roads, like I said, that tend to run through the most underserved neighborhoods that have not received, safe infrastructure, traffic calming, things like speed bumps. So that's a big effort of ours. Other than that, we have been monitoring other projects, including adding parking protected bike lanes on the local lanes of Vine Street. We're also involved with the Chinatown Stitch project, advocating for safer Vine Street Local. There are a lot of examples of projects that we're involved in. I will say that the parking protected bike lane legislation gets in the way of a lot of the projects we want to do. So that's been a major focus over the past 7 years.
Nicole, can cyclists and drivers ever live in harmony in Philly? Or is there just too much danger in this way we commute around the city?
Of course, they can live in harmony. There's examples of other cities where there are all users of the road working together. Speed is a really big factor. Also, vehicle size. There are a lot of decisions made on the federal level that prioritize the safety for people inside of cars and not the people on the outside. So there's a lot of work to be able to regulate how fast cars can go, how heavy they are, how big they are, the size of their front grills. And then there's the infrastructure component. I like to say that infrastructure solves safety problems of today, where enforcement solves problems of tomorrow. Enforcement helps us to change driver behavior. If you've driven on Roosevelt Boulevard and noticed that people drive slower because they don't want to get tickets, that's a way to show people that driving slower helps increase the safety. But adding infrastructure also slows people down. Bike lanes are a form of traffic calming. So if you're concerned about people speeding through your neighborhood, adding a bike lane and reducing the size of the road is a great way to be able to improve the safety. But we need to do all these things, and it's totally possible for drivers to slow down, change their behavior, and for bicyclists to do the same thing if they're given a safe place to ride. We think about the most dangerous situations are where there are a lot of conflict zones between drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. So often people will think about in the intersection, but we know that separating bike lanes from the travel lane with physical protection increases the safety for all users.
So my perspective, I'm a driver. The way in which my life is set up, I drive all over the city. I need reliable transportation. I need a car to get me places quickly. I've got children, there's play dates and sports. So for my life, I need a car. Do you all have those types of conversations? Like, I can't necessarily fit my whole life on a bike.
Yeah, definitely. Part of our mission isn't to say every single person needs to ride a bike and only use a bike to get around. I know that is not possible in our city. It really depends on where you live, what kind of transportation opportunities you have. There's sections of our city where every block there's a bus that could take you where you need to go. But there's a lot of sections of our city that's not possible, or you have to go to different parts of the city. You have to pick people up, drop people off. Your grocery store isn't right next door to you. There's a lot of things that reduce your opportunity to get around outside of a car. And I like to think if you're in a car, you're accountable to making sure that other people around you are safe. And not just yourself. So making sure that you stop at stop signs, stop at red lights, don't make illegal right turns, basic things like following the rules of the road. Everybody is supposed to do that. That does not happen. And so if you are somebody that relies on getting around using a car, follow the rules of the road. It's really that much. Getting where you need to go a couple minutes faster is not worth somebody's life. And we have created this culture where it's just you inside of your car and your actions don't impact anybody else, but that's just not true. And I think that also plays into the debate in Center City that convenience is more important than someone's ability to safely get home. It is heartbreaking to hear the number of people who are killed just a couple blocks from their house. This happens all the time. So I just ask for drivers, if you have to rely on a car, it's totally fine. And like I said, it is impossible not to do that in parts of this city. but to just give grace to everyone around you because everyone deserves to get home.
Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me on CityCast Philly.
Yeah.
Stay tuned tomorrow to hear another perspective on the issue. I talked to Leo Levinson, the head of the Center City Residents Association. He's floating a compromise to accommodate residents affected by the no stopping in bike lanes law. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode. Tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.